I'm going to call this meeting to order. This is the Jonesboro Land Bank Commission meeting today on January the 8th, and we'll go with a roll call.
Ms. Durham?
Present.
Mr. Hurden?
Present.
Mr. Hollywood?
Present.
Mr. Martin?
Present.
Mr. Mills?
Present.
Mr. Moore?
Present.
Mr. Osmond is absent. Dr. Warner?
Here.
And Mr. Dennis Sulper is absent as well.
And Jessica's
And
ill
Jessica
today.
is ill.
So we have a quorum. And on approval of last meeting's minutes. Take a minute to review these if you will, and I'll accept a motion when you're ready.
I give a motion to approve the minutes as provided.
So Jeff's a motion. Who's the second?
Second.
James. All in favor of the minutes being approved as written?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, thank you. We'll go right into old business. Old business today is mostly going to be in the form of an update, but certainly if you have any pleasures that you'd like to put forth to the commission, you can. And I'm going to turn this over to Jonathan and let him kind of update us. John, is that okay?
That'll work. So I'm going to keep this short, and if y'all have specific questions, feel free to ask them as we get to it. 115 North of Drake, I was speaking with Miss Diane yesterday, I believe it was. That one, even though I have it still in closing, the title, the deed has already been filed with the county, so that one should be completed. That will be our first property into our inventory. This is the one, if you recall, it was donated. There is an existing structure on the lot, so there's, later this afternoon or tomorrow sometime, I'm going to go by there, make sure that it's secure. If there's any windows knocked out, we'll have to make sure all that's boarded up. Moving on to 120 North Bridge, the auction date, the commissioner set the auction date for January 14th. The owner has 10 business days to redeem the delinquent taxes. If the owner doesn't redeem the taxes, then sometime around the 1st of February, will be issued a deed from the State Land Commissioner, and that will be placed in our inventory as well. It usually takes their staff a couple of days just to do the paperwork and all that. So hopefully we'll be through with 120 North Bridge by the 1st of February. 113 North Bridge, this is the one that y'all approved with this group as well. Mr. Pacheco was in Mexico, and Miss Diane's had a difficult time scheduling this. We're trying to work out the schedules between the mayor's office and Mr. Pacheco's schedule. I think we're getting close to that. So closing should be started pretty soon. I'll have a better update probably at the next meeting on that. 1444 West Huntington. This is the one across from Dollar General. Y'all wanted to move that to March. So I've really not had much conversation as far as this one's concerned with that. 827 Warner. This is the housing, the housing project that we're going to do, the rehab. I am putting it on city council agenda for, I believe it's next Tuesday, the 15th for purchase. Once we purchase this property, or if the city council approves it, we'll have to go in. There'll be some initial work on the front end to secure the structure. And then there's a process that we're going to have to go through to identify a potential developer to potentially rehab this property.
And that's going to come up, I think, in a later business today
Yeah,
about how to
talk
do that.
about soliciting developers and whatnot later on in the meeting. Moving on from 827, going to 501 Marshall. I am going to try my best to get this on the city council agenda for the first meeting in February. There was some concern with all of this being new. I didn't want to overload the city council meeting with new information and have a 5 or 10 minute discussion at council about what we're trying to do. So I'm trying to introduce this slowly to the city council. I'm going to try to have our foreclosure on the agenda for February 5th. And if city council approves this lien foreclosure, then obviously we'll get all the paperwork to the city attorney and they'll start this process. This will be the first, to my knowledge, this will be the first lien foreclosure that the city has ever attempted to pursue. So there could be a learning curve in this process. And then the last one, 107 and 109 North Bridge. This is the one I presented it, I believe it was at the December meeting for $6,000. We have a signed offer and acceptance for $6,000 apiece. Y'all had asked me to go back and try to renegotiate with Mr. Wood and get a lower price, preferably $4,000, which is what we paid for 113. I can tell you after some discussion, I'm not sure how successful we're going to be at that. There's some other properties in the works in this area, so my opinion is we have a 6-month signed offer and acceptance. I can always go back and talk to him over the next 6 months. I say we leave it and we pursue.
I think the motion, correct me if I'm wrong, but the last meeting we motioned and we'd put this back on the agenda for action in April, which would be within the 6-month window. So you'll have an opportunity to revisit this. And there may be some changing circumstances in that area that would make us have different considerations. Am I correct on that?
Yeah,
right.
we're going to be having some conversations with other individuals in that area in the coming weeks, months, that could play a role in how y'all feel about 107 and 109 North Bridge. We'll just put it that way. And that being said, I've kind of hit some of our main properties that we're addressing right now. Is there any questions or concerns at this point before we head into new business?
On that 120 North Bridge with the land commissioner, and I may have this wrong, I thought I always had the understanding that once the auction date came, and if someone acquired that property, then the original owner still had, I was thinking 60 or 90 days that they could come forward, pay the back taxes, and it goes back to them. Is that accurate?
That's correct. So we'll actually get into that discussion if you see under new business and see the state auction. The difference in what you're discussing and what I'm talking about, you're talking about their annual one-time-a-year auction. What we bought 120 North Bridge off of is a different list. It's called the post-auction sales list. If you buy it from the for example, the 2019 auction that's coming up in April, there is a 90-day period where the owner can come back and redeem it. Once it hits that post-auction list, things, operate a little differently.
Much rapidly.
And that's what we bought 120 North Bridge off of. They have, they sent us a letter. I can put that with our documents next meeting.
So ultimately, it's already gone through the.
This has already been to the real auction,
This has
Okay.
been-
the yearly inventory auction.
Yeah, this property's had delinquent taxes, I believe, since 2000, is either 12 or 11. I mean, it's been several years. And it never auctioned off or never sold at the annual auction just because the city essentially had a demolition lien, right? We paid, $8,000, $9,000 for the property, and then we got that check back. So the private citizen would have had to have paid almost between $8,000 and $9,000 just in our municipal liens. And that's the main reason why it didn't sell at the auction that you're referring to with the 90-day redemption period. So
I got a question on 107, 109. If I remember the offer, there was a request to forego some liens on unrelated property. Is that still in play?
yes, the exact offer is the way it stands. The property you're referring to is 215 South Patrick. I mean, it is where it's at.
So Jeff, what we've done is we've just tabled the offer just as it was exactly made by the seller. And my thought would be in April, whatever your all's pleasure is, we can adjust it at that point. And I guess I think I'm speaking correctly that if we were to accept what's on the table, there would be no further negotiation. It would just be sold. If we change it in any way, then we're back into a negotiation, which we may want to be. So our hands are not tied either way, and we've tabled it right now to give us a chance for you all to consider some other properties in that area.
Yeah, I think once, I'm gonna meet with some other owners in that area. Once we have those conversations, we'll go back and revisit Mr. Wood's offer
And then bring you guys some more information about
and
where we
bring a
want to go.
better picture of what all is going to be happening in that area. So, any other questions? As I said, I don't know how we're going to proceed, how y'all want to proceed with this structure that's at 115 North Bridge, or North Drake.
Well, I was going to
We're going to
suggest
be-
we ought to take a code enforcement person with you or a building official with you when you go look, if you could. So once we have that property in our inventory, it'll be our responsibility to make it safe and compliant.
Yeah.
So any other questions about any of these properties? Anybody have another thought? Okay, I'm going to move on to number 5, new business. And we're going to just to give you a quick staff report. I noticed I didn't recognize, but Bill is here today. Bill, thank you for being here. And we may have a couple of questions here, I guess, about some funding and that. So if you want to, Jonathan, you want to go over the letter A?
Essentially, this shows not all the accounts in the land bank, but the primary accounts that y'all guys are going to be able to spend money from. The 3 being professional services, land and improvements, condemnations, and demolitions. Obviously, we had money in there from last year, but this being the first meeting of the new year, those accounts have been reset. So this is what we have to work with primarily. There could be some changes in this going forward, maybe, but this is what we have going into the new year. As I was mentioning, 115 North Drake, I'm fairly confident she filed the deed at the county. So the property inventory right now, it shows 0. But I think that should be a 1. I just hadn't had a chance to update the agenda. But that being said, the staff report should be fairly short and simple.
Jonathan, whenever you're talking about the accounts being reset, so basically whatever in excess we have from one year won't carry over to the next, we'll always restart back, correct?
Yeah, I mean, it may not be the right accounting term to put it, but my way I look at it is use it or lose it, right? If you don't spend it in that year, it goes back to the general fund, and it's redispersed in other ways.
Bill, would you want to address any of those issues at all?
Really, the one thing that I'll mention, and Jonathan and Dr. Warner and I talked about this, is the amount of money that we appropriated this year for actual purchase of property. I know there had been a request for a larger amount initially, but the one thing that we emphasized in our meetings and have talked about internally and for y'all to know is if there's a situation where you come forward with the property and it makes sense for this to be in the land bank inventory and there's a compelling reason why we should acquire this property, we're always going to go back and reconsider the amounts that we budgeted. And one of the benefits of the way we did budget this year by resolution versus by ordinance does give us more flexibility to act quicker on the council floor and amending the budget. So just keep that in mind, that we're not going to hamper the efforts, objectives, and missions of the land bank based strictly upon a budget that we submitted, back August, September is when we worked on this. So, things in your world are obviously dynamic and we'll react to that as appropriate going forward.
Any questions for Bill on anything?
Just to add to that, obviously council approves the budget. Anything we do has to be approved by council. So the way I view it, obviously we do have a placeholder in the budget, but the council is the final say so on both items, right? So if they approve it, then it's approved.
Anything else on that? Any questions? Bill, thank you.
This amount is a per employee. Okay.
So we're going to spend a couple of minutes on this letter B. This is the request for qualifications, a tentative plan. And As we mentioned several different times, the various projects we're looking are creating our learning curve for us. And so the 827 Warner, our anticipation is that that will be approved at City Council for purchase. And that leaves us with a house that by our initial assessments anyway can be rehabbed. And so that begs the question that we are going to need someone to do that, a contractor, developer type company. And so we need to put in place, I guess, a procedure for doing this for future properties. I've had a significant discussion with Jessica, who's ill, by the way, today. That's why we don't have our attorney with us. And the initial proposal with your approval and also with your suggestions would be to put together a list of qualifications. And if you refer to our bylaws and our guidelines, there already much of that's in place. The city also has some policies in place for that. But the idea is to create a list of potential developers. So when you see requests for qualifications, that's what it refers to, is the developers who meet the qualifications can get their company and their entities added to our list. We anticipate wanting to update the list on a yearly basis. What we thought we might do is try to get a request out to the potential developers, and certainly if you all have some suggestions for the list, we'll send out a public notice here in the next week or two and invite them to probably what would be considered an initial informational meeting for them, and then invite them to our next meeting here before the commission for us basically to have a discussion and a question answer with them to be sure that any concerns they have are alleviated. And again, in anticipation that we are going to have one property that we're going to have this need in a real way, and then for future practices as well. I hope I explained that well enough. If I didn't, please ask some questions.
Dr. Warner, I have a question. Would you anticipate then that when this property is ready to go out and to be rehabbed, that we would request bids from these qualified?
No, and I'm gonna speak out of turn here because I'm not the attorney. Bill may can help with this, or John. But anything that's less than $20,000 by what we're doing does not have to be put out to bid. So what we would anticipate is we'll have a list of approved, if you will, developers. And we would ask them to make proposals to us about what they want to do with the property, the purchase price, et cetera. And then it would come back, in my mind, to the commission here for approval, first of all, by us. And then once that we make a decision on who we would award this project to, it would go to the city council for final approval, and then we would undertake the project. But we're trying to avoid the situation of having to bid every project, and it's not required under the $20,000 mark. Bill, am I speaking correctly?
That's essentially correct.
Okay.
When you do qualifications, you're looking at that, right? When you have a project, you look to see who's the most qualified, not necessarily.
The bid would only be one aspect of it.
Yeah, the financial part would only be one aspect of it, depending on the project. Like 827 Warner's an interior. Essentially, it'll be an interior revision, right? An interior remodeling project. Some developers that submit their qualifications may be better aligned to do that type of project, where, for example, going forward, we may have a larger scale project where we want something else done, and your small local builder may not want to tackle that type of project. So the qualifications allows you to match the project with the type of person that you want.
Let me throw out one other thought too about this, is that it does two things. For each project that comes before us, and I think we all as a group anticipate that we're going to become pretty busy down the road here with different projects, but at any rate, it saves us having to vet a group of developers each time we have a project. They've already been vetted and we know they're qualified. It also will limit people who don't have the capacity perhaps the bonding, the various things you look for when you're choosing a contractor. It'll keep us from having to, for each project, go through that. And then on a yearly basis, we could certainly add or remove people from the list according to their desires or their performance or whatever. And the second issue is that you will have the opportunity, in my mind, as a commission, to add criteria to the project. And let's just use 827 as a example. So one thing you would probably end up considering would be price, right? What they want to pay for the property, knowing that we've paid $10,000 for it. The second thing would be that perhaps we want to stipulate that the property has to remain as single-family residence and be rehabbed in this case and not demolished. And things like, I could go down a more specific list, but you all can probably come up with a better list than I could. But that's the point, is that you can add things to the project so that when they look at that project and make a proposal, they know what we're expecting to be done to that project.
So by that discussion, it sounds to me like what we're doing basically is offering the property to them. They go ahead and rehab it under their own guidelines.
Well, they make a proposal to us before we,
But we're not buying the rehab, we're just selling them the property under the guidelines that you're talking
with the
about.
stipulations. Yes, sir. Is that seem right to everybody?
No, we'll say this. I'll leave it to Jessica and Carol to be the final say on this, but the way it operates in Little Rock, they sell a project, they sell a piece of property, for example, rehab, right? And there's certain guidelines within that framework that when you sell it, they have to sell it, keep it single-family residential. They have to, you set your framework.
Stipulate some things. Timeline.
They design their contracts in a way that if the person who's purchasing the property doesn't live up to their end of the deal, then it reverts back to the land bank, right? So I'm not saying it would ever happen. I hope it never happens. But the contracts, the way these need to be worded, needs to give us the ability to come in and step in if we see that we've sold a piece of property and it's not being done the way we thought it was supposed to be done, that we have the ability to go in. And in that case, we would take back.
Hey, Jonathan, with this list of contractors we're referring to, would it be expanded out for, say like 115 North Drake for, say it's going to have to be boarded up or locks changed or whatnot for small jobs like that, up to straight demolition?
Yeah.
So, so we're not looking for just contractors to go in and rehab properties, but also for those that could do demolition as well?
So you're a contractor, so you're familiar with the process. The city has an already established process that they use, for example, demolitions through code enforcement inspections. Any type of project, there's a process. But to answer your question, yes, we would not just be looking for general contractors that can build single-family residential. We have a process that allows us to identify a demolition crew.
So the short answer is yes.
Yeah, we
would accept requests from other types of contractors. Is that where you're?
Yes, I just want to make sure that, we're not just stuck to, say, one group that's been doing the demolition, whereas, maybe we can get 2 or 3 different ones in, or, anything that could be, sufficient price-wise, budget-wise.
Useful too.
A lot of that work, really the only thing new that the land bank's adding to this process is the rehab part, right? Right now, the code enforcement, it's nothing new to put out for demolitions, because we demo houses all the time. So there's a process in place for that.
But wouldn't the demolition be coming from the land bank if we're the ones that don't have the property in our inventory?
You can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you'd have a couple options. We could ask code enforcement if they want to be the ones to orchestrate that, or we could ask for a proposal from a contractor, as you're suggesting, Jeremy. I think either way is fine.
Well, yeah, I just feel more comfortable if it's under our watch and under our guys,
Sure.
and it's in our inventory, that we're the ones that are calling the shots on who's
doing it and how they're doing it, and asbestos and whatnot. There's a lot of issues, as you are aware. I think the other important point with this is that this is not just limited to Craighead County or Jonesboro contractors and developers. And so in a sense of fairness, there'll be ample public notice given according to the law and even above that so that we do get good participation. I think it behooves us as a group to have a lot of options in rehab because it'll save us money ultimately, you would think. Does that all make sense, Jeff? You have a lot of experience. You have another comment?
No, I was just wanting to make sure that I understood that we were not rehabbing the house, that it was being done.
We're gonna
and
get-
all our involvement is really just selling the property.
We're going to get Habitat to do the rehabs.
Good luck on that. We're pretty thin.
But no, I think you're exactly right. Our plan is, and I think Jonathan's point is a strong one, that, we do have some stipulations and criteria, and if those are not met, we need to have a recourse. And so we'll leave that up to the legal team to be sure the contracts are correct and that they're written in a way that protects the city from the properties that they've acquired. That's very important.
And to take it one step farther, we're not building it, right? But there are plans with any permit process. There are plans submitted ahead of time that you have. So even though I'm not going to go in and do the interior, remodel, it's submitted ahead of time so I know what it's supposed to be, right? And we aren't just a standalone department within the city. We overlap with other departments and work in partnership. One of the things, for example, is the permit process. So this 827 Warner, they're going to have to submit 4 permits to do the job, whether it's planning, engineering, or inspections. In this case, it would be inspections. We have individuals that will go into the house. They'll do, whether it's a plumbing inspection, an electrical inspection, whatever. So we're going to be able to make sure administratively, internally, that the plans that are submitted that are approved by both y'all guys and the permit process, that they're building according to those, and we'll be going in periodically and checking the structure to make sure that they're doing what they say they're going to do.
Yes.
And if they don't, then we'll take it to the next part, which is what Dr. Moore was referring to. We're going to design our contracts in a way that allows us to step in and take over the project and take back the property.
We don't anticipate, hopefully,
yeah.
that won't be a big problem. But just out of a sense of protection for the public and the city, I think the documents have to reflect those concerns.
Well, hopefully we that, if not all of that out, when we look through our qualifications, administratively and, inspections, engineering, planning, whatever, we have a relationship built with most, if not all, of the local developers that would be submitting stuff like this. Some of your, ones located outside of Jonesboro, we may not, but we'll be able to go through and look at the qualifications and make sure we weed out most of those concerns.
It's anticipated that we'll set up this meeting, and the people we would want to have there would be any of the commissioners certainly are invited. The press is invited to, Keith and Destiny, if y'all want to come. And we'll set up a meeting to look at the qualifications here in the very near future to put those out as a public request so that we can meet this timeline of having potential developer contractors before the commission at our next meeting so that they can ask you all questions and you can ask them questions and sort of.
One other question, I apologize, I should have looked at this, Bill. But we were having some discussion at council level about professional services. Where does that stand?
That's a really good question.
Because I know Dennis, I wish he was here too, because if there are changes in professional services and the way that we go about doing that, that would dictate.
They'd have to adhere to it, sure.
Yeah, well, there's a couple issues with the ordinance that was on council. One, there had been so many iterations of that we've essentially decided to table it and go back and try to come up with one that everybody can review again. And 2, the actual form of the ordinance was such that it was going to cost about $1,500 to publish. So we've also gone back and rewritten the ordinance so it'd be incorporated by reference. So there's been a couple changes. The last meeting, we decided to hold it over and do some more review on that. So there's nothing different today that you would have to change.
So we could proceed as we're
We can proceed.
discussing, as you seem like. So does anybody have any additional questions about this idea? So I'll accept a motion to set up this meeting and to proceed with the plan as outlined, if it's your pleasure.
I make the motion to proceed as outlined to set up a meeting with potential contractors.
Okay, second.
I second.
Second from Jeremy. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Okay, thank you. If there are any further questions about any of that, I'm going to move forward. And so we're going to go and let Jonathan just talk a little bit about the state land auction. I'm glad Bill's here because we may have a question about how to proceed at the actual auction.
Okay, so this ties back into the conversation, Brent, that we were having earlier in the meeting. Every year, the State Land Commissioner has one large auction at the county, and they will sell off or auction off all delinquent taxes, all parcels with delinquent taxes, not only from the city of Jonesboro, but any city in our county, right? So last year, as it pertains to the city of Jonesboro, we had 28 pieces of property that the city had some sort of interest in, different levels, some up to several $1,000s, some up to just a few $100s. It varied, right? So the question that I'm going to present to y'all, and I'm open to ideas, this is going to be our first go at this. Number one, it's an auction, right? And when you go into an auction, you're at a disadvantage you're at you don't want to publicly tell where your limits are at, right, in an auction. I don't want to go and y'all guys want to have a piece of property, but everybody I'm bidding against knows that I can only bid to a certain amount. It's
Well,
public information,
Can I
right?
make an additional observation? And also, and just for your information, this auction list will be published and we'll, as a commission, have an opportunity to look through it and target certain properties if there are any that meet any of our needs in our revitalization areas. So it's not just a question of going to the auction and looking for bargains, but it's a question of if any of these meet our goals and objectives. That would be another piece of information I think is important. So
That list is usually, again, it takes their staff a little while to get the paperwork in order, but the general rule is that they publish it sometime in February. They haven't, specifically said the exact date yet, but once that list is published and it goes out, I will send it to everybody. My suggestion would be, because, there is the potential to have 20, 30 properties on this list. That's a rather large amount, right? I've been trying to start small. So to come in one meeting with 20 or 30 properties, that's an amount.
maybe would it be okay if we get the list out to everybody and we could maybe make just a short description of each one that
Yeah.
even gets close to our needs and objectives, and then everybody can look at it beforehand. So just to save a huge discussion at a meeting over an auction list. So that might be one way to proceed on that. And I guess the bigger question comes back to what John posed about if he were to go to the auction, how would he be able to proceed? And Bill, can I put you on the spot just for a minute to maybe address that a little bit, if at all possible?
Well, don't we have
Yeah, Jeremy?
we have the option to purchase those prior to the auction though, correct?
No. You have the option to post anything on the post-auction sales list. To purchase, yeah. We could call right now to the State Land Commissioner, look at their post-auction sales list and purchase one like we did 120 North Bridge.
That's where we've had this conversation before though, where the properties were offered to the city prior to them being auctioned off.
You have the option as the owner to, for example, 115 North Drake, right? Whereas the new owner, when they filed the deed, we were able to go in before this is auctioned off and redeem the taxes through their process.
So that allows the owner another option.
It allows
to keep
the owner-
property off the auction, is that what you're saying?
Yeah, there's ample opportunity for the owner before it ever reaches the auction to go back and fix the title and the taxes. And so to answer your question, if we get it donated to us before it gets to auction and we're now the new owner, then I can go ahead of time and, like we did with 115 North Drake, redeem all delinquent taxes and fix the title and essentially work with the closing company to get all this done administratively, right? But once it's published, then we have to wait till the auction. And they don't publish that list. They are required by, I think it's state law or federal law, something they told me, and I forgot, but they are required to give the owner, I believe it's 4 years from the time that it's delinquent, 2 years at the county, and then 18 to 24 months at the state level to give the owner that opportunity to redeem their taxes. And then once they fail to do that, whether it's because they're deceased or whatever the reason, then it's put on that list for auction.
So it's been looked at a couple of times
But
already.
once it's on that
That's what
auction
Bill
list,
said
it's
so.
fair game. We
Yeah.
can buy it or whatever.
Bill, thank you, sorry.
Sure, and I guess this might not be a definitive answer to your question, but I understand the dilemma. And so, probably reiterating what you said, but what my recommendation would be, Jonathan, for you to do a staff summary on those properties that you think are potentially valuable to the land bank, and then let the commission review the list as well. And any of them that didn't pop up on your radar, Jonathan, do the same. They can bounce those back to you, do a staff summary, and you might even circulate that, like we're doing now with including other people in that process internally and other things that we do, but include Code and Daryl, some of the other folks on there as well, and just get their feedback, thoughts on those properties. But once you've got that list, I think understanding that you're at a competitive disadvantage at the auction if, for, and rightly so, transparency purposes, we have pre-authorized bid amounts for you on these properties. I think what we need to do, once we get that list and you give us what you anticipate those properties might auction for, as well as what the encumbrances on them that would require a minimum bid, then I think we have a discussion internally, possibly the chairman of the finance committee, and say, here's a dilemma we're faced with. In an attempt to be competitive at the auction, are there any alternatives to disclosing a limit per property, some other mechanism that we still have a relative amount of disclosure and transparency to the public, but we don't completely lose our competitive advantage at the auction. So I think that would be the second step in that process, and I think we could have that discussion internally and hopefully come up with a way that we could accomplish both what you need to and what we need to do in terms of having that on the council's agenda and approval process there. That makes sense.
Yes, sir, thank you very much.
And I will say one other thing, tying into what he said. We certify some of our liens. We talked about this briefly at our last meeting. There's two things you can do with a lien. You can either certify it or you can take it through the foreclosure process, right? We've been certifying, we've not foreclosed. So if we have an interest in the property, it's because we've certified a lien against it. My suggestion, even if we aren't fully committed to buying the property or going above and beyond what we should, it costs us no money to bid our certified liens. So in other words, if you see a piece of property on this list and it shows that there's $500 of a municipal lien, I would at least ask that we make the minimum that we put into it, right? Because the worst case scenario is the state's going to send us our municipal liens back. Essentially what we did at 120 North Bridge, right? We approved it to be purchased for, let's say, $9,000, but then the state wrote us a check for
that amount.
essentially covering that amount for our liens, right? So it was a net zero. It was almost that we just renewed our liens. And I would ask that we do at least that if I'm going to go to this auction. That way, going forward, once we do this 3 or 4 years in a row, it eliminates that post-auction sales list where our properties can eventually be negotiated away. And if we make the minimum bid on our properties that we have an interest in, we can eliminate that.
Jonathan,
It's just a
when,
suggestion.
this may be a silly question, but when the auction comes up, do we have money in the budget to acquire additional properties with these that are in the process of
Bill answer
closing?
that.
I mean, it's not like we have an open checkbook.
Me, Bill, and
Or-
I'll let you answer it.
Who's your boss?
I mean, these properties may be lower in value, obviously, and so.
He's
I
got the
just-
money. I'll let Bill answer.
This goes back really to the comment I made earlier that once we have the staff summary, we have estimated bid prices, then we would need to go back if it's above the amount that we originally appropriated, the 25,000. And certainly, we could take that to the council at the same time and say, in addition to having some limit set on the amount we can bid on this probably group of properties, may be the way to do it. So we have these, 4 or 5 properties that the staff summary have recommended would be appropriate, advantageous for the land bank to acquire. And can we have a umbrella limit of, let's say, $30,000 on these 4 properties? And I'm just using that as a possible solution to this, and we're not disclosing on an individual property basis. At the same time, we would have to say, and by the way, we need an additional appropriation of funds in the original land bank land acquisition budget to cover these additional potential acquisitions, and we would do that. I would think at the same time that we try to resolve the other issue in the overall bid process.
Hey, Bill, will all these be coming out of our 2019 budget, the ones that are currently, I know they're carrying over from 18, but
When
again,
the check is issued, that's what
Cash.
budget it comes out of.
Yeah, we're basically on a cash basis accounting for the most part.
Even though some of these were approved in 2018, it's, for example, if they approve 827 Warner, that's going to take $10,000 out of this year's budget,
Correct.
even though it was approved by y'all in 2018.
Does anybody have any other questions? As we said in the first meeting 6 months ago, this is a learning curve for everyone, and after a couple of years, we should have it down, but we're working on each thing as it comes up slowly. So, and again, we just don't want to make a misstep. We want to do the things correctly to serve the land bank correctly. So, any other questions about the land auction? No? Any public comment? We have 2 people from the public here with us. All right, I'll accept a motion to adjourn.
Motion, Jones.
Doesn't require a second. Is anybody all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, we're officially adjourned. Thank you so much.